Linda Carmichael had always believed that rules were made to be followed. Not just by other people, but especially by other people. She was the kind of woman who got angry if her neighbor's trash can was out 5 minutes before pickup day. She didn't see herself as mean or nosy. No, not at all. Linda thought of herself as someone who cared about community standards, someone who stood up for what was right. And in her neighborhood, that meant making sure everyone played by the same rules. She lived in a quiet suburb outside Portland, Oregon. The houses were neat and tidy, with matching fences and well-trimmed lawns. Everyone knew each other's names, but most kept to themselves. It wasn't a bad place to live, just predictable. And Linda liked predictable. Predictable meant everything stayed the way it was supposed to. Linda had been on the HOA board, that stands for Homeowners Association, for almost 6 years. She took her job very seriously. She read every rule book cover to cover. She attended every meeting. If someone painted their front door the wrong shade of red, Linda noticed. If someone let their grass grow too high, she wrote them a letter. She even once called the city because a teenager parked his bike too close to the sidewalk. She wasn't being cruel. She was just doing what needed to be done to keep things running smoothly. To Linda, the HOA was like the neighborhood police force, but nicer. They made sure everyone followed the same rules so that no one felt left out or treated unfairly. At least, that's how she explained it to her husband when he told her maybe she should chill out a little. But Linda couldn't chill out. That wasn't who she was. She believed that without rules, chaos would take over. People would start throwing garbage everywhere, letting their dogs run wild, building weird backyard sheds with no permits. Before you know it, the whole neighborhood would look like some jungle of mess and noise. No thank you. So when a new family moved into the house next door, Linda was already watching them closely before they even unpacked their boxes. The Morales family moved in during early spring. Mr. Morales was a biology teacher. Mrs. Morales worked from home as a graphic designer. They had 2 kids, a teenage daughter, and a young boy who looked about 10. They seemed nice enough, waved politely when Linda came out to water her flowers. But then something strange started happening. They began turning their backyard into a garden. Not just any garden. A real garden. Rows of vegetables, fruit trees, tomato plants climbing tall stakes. There were compost bins, birdhouses, and even a few chickens clucking around in a wooden coop. Linda watched through her kitchen window as the family worked together under the sun, laughing and picking lettuce, feeding the birds, and checking on the bees. At first, Linda tried to ignore it. Maybe it was temporary. Maybe they were just trying. Something fun. But after a week, then 2 weeks, then a month, it was still there. Growing bigger every day. And Linda couldn't stand it. This wasn't a farm. This was a suburban neighborhood. You weren't supposed to have animals and messy gardens and dirt everywhere. It looked unprofessional, uncontrolled. It might bring down property values. She grabbed the HOA rulebook and flipped through the pages. Section 7, Article 4 clearly said, "No livestock or poultry shall be permitted within residential zones." And while it didn't specifically mention bees or compost bins, Linda figured those fell under unsanctioned agricultural activity. She marked the page with a yellow highlighter and closed the book with a satisfying thud. This was going to stop. Now Linda wasn't a violent person. She wouldn't dream of knocking on their door and yelling, "Oh no." She did things the proper way, the civilized way, through official channels. She sat down at her laptop and typed out a formal complaint to the HOA board. She included photos of the chicken coop and the vegetable beds. She added a note saying the chickens made noise and could carry diseases. She even mentioned the bees as a possible safety risk. Then she hit send. That night, she poured herself a glass of wine and smiled. Things were going to go back to normal soon. Rules would be followed again. Life would be peaceful. But Linda didn't know that this was only the beginning. What she also didn't know was that the Morales family wasn't just planting vegetables, they were planting seeds of change. Their garden wasn't just food. It was a lifestyle, a way of living closer to nature, a small act of rebellion against modern life, and they weren't going to give it up easily. As the days passed, Linda waited for the HOA to respond. She expected a quick warning, maybe a fine. She imagined the Morales family pulling up their tomato plants, shutting down the coop, and apologizing for breaking the rules. But nothing happened. The garden stayed. The chickens clucked, the bees buzzed, and Linda? She got more and more annoyed, so she decided to do what she did best. She doubled down. Linda Carmichael wasn't a patient woman. She believed that rules were meant to be followed, and if someone broke them, they should face the consequences quickly. So when her formal complaint to the HOA about the Morales family's urban farm didn't result in any action after 2 full weeks, she started to feel something she hated very much: powerless. She had sent clear photos. She had cited the exact rulebook section. She had even included a note about bees possibly stinging children. What more did they want from her? So one Saturday morning, while sipping her coffee and looking out at the Morales' backyard through her kitchen window, Linda made a decision. If the HOA wouldn't take this seriously, then she would go straight to the authorities. She picked up her phone, took a few more pictures of the chicken coop and vegetable garden, and dialed 911. When the operator answered, Linda tried to sound calm but serious. "Yes, hello," she said. "I need to report something happening next door. It might be dangerous." The operator asked for her name and location, which Linda provided without hesitation. "I live at 423 Maple Street," she said, "and the house next door, 425, is keeping animals illegally. There are chickens running around with no permits, and I believe there may also be bees. I've already told the HOA, but nothing's been done. I'm worried it could be unsafe for the neighborhood." There was a short pause on the other end. "Ma'am, are these animals causing any immediate danger? Are they aggressive or loose in the neighborhood?" the operator asked. "No, not exactly," Linda admitted. "But they could be. Chickens carry diseases. Bees sting people. And this isn't a farm, it's a residential area." The operator explained that unless there was an immediate threat or violation of city law, the police couldn't just come over and remove the animals. But since Linda insisted, they agreed to send a patrol car to check things out. About 20 minutes later, 2 police officers pulled up in front of the Morales house. Mr. Morales was outside watering his tomato plants. His wife was sitting on the porch with a cup of tea. Their son was feeding the chickens, and their daughter was sketching in a notebook nearby. They all looked up when the officers stepped out of the car. "Morning," one officer said politely. "We got a call about some animals next door." Mr. Morales stood up slowly, clearly confused. "Animals? Chickens and bees, I think," the officer added. At that moment, Linda opened her front door just enough to peek out. She watched closely, arms crossed, a satisfied smile forming on her lips. The officers walked around the property, looked at the chicken coop, checked the compost bins, and even glanced at the small bee boxes near the back fence. They asked a few questions like how many chickens there were, if they had any permits, and whether the neighbors had complained about noise or smells. Mr. Morales answered calmly and respectfully. He explained that he and his family were practicing urban farming as a way to live sustainably. He showed them the permit he had gotten from the city for the chickens, which Linda hadn't known about, and mentioned that the bees were legal, as long as they weren't aggressive, which they weren't. After about 15 minutes, the officers thanked him and walked back to their car. As they drove away, Linda stepped outside, hopeful. "Well?" she called out, trying to sound casual. One officer rolled down his window. "There's no violation here, ma'am," he said. "The chickens are permitted, and bees aren't illegal unless they're causing problems. We'll keep an eye on things, but unless something changes, there's nothing we can do." With that, the car pulled away, leaving Linda standing in her driveway, stunned and embarrassed. She stormed back into her house and slammed the door. How could this happen? How could the police side with them? She had done everything right. She had followed procedure. She had called the cops, for crying out loud. That night, Linda sat at her laptop, red-faced and angry. She opened her email and started typing furiously. This time she wasn't going to stop at the HOA. She was going to contact animal control. She was going to call the health department. She was going to make sure the city council knew what was happening on Maple Street. No one ignored Linda Carmichael and got away with it. Meanwhile, across the fence, the Morales family was laughing. They had seen Linda watching from behind her curtains as the police left. They knew who had called, and they weren't surprised. "We expected this eventually," Mrs. Morales said, shaking her head. "Some people just don't like change," her husband smiled. "Well, we're not going anywhere. Let her call every department in town. We're doing nothing wrong." Their teenage daughter looked at her phone. "You know what? I bet this is going to end up online somehow. People love stories like this." And she was right. By Monday morning, someone from the neighborhood had posted about the incident on Reddit. The post read, "HOA Karen calls the cops on urban farming family. Officers say nothing illegal. Full drama inside." It didn't take long for the thread to blow up. People loved underdog stories. They loved seeing entitled neighbors get shut down. And most of all, they loved watching someone try to ruin another person's dream garden, only to fail completely. Comments poured in. "Karen called the cops on chickens? Urban farming is cool. Hope they keep growing." Why? Does HOA even care about fresh food in your own yard? This Linda sounds like a nightmare neighbor. Linda didn't know it yet, but her reputation was starting to crack, and she wasn't going to let that happen. If calling the cops didn't work, she would find another way. She always did. Linda Carmichael was not someone who gave up easily. In fact, she didn't believe in giving up at all. If one door closed, she'd knock louder. If that didn't work, she'd call someone with a key. And if they said no, she'd find another way in. That was just how she operated. So when the police left without doing anything about the Morales family's garden, Linda didn't just feel ignored. She felt disrespected. She had followed all the rules. She had made a proper report. She had even included evidence in the form of photos. But instead of taking action, the officers had smiled politely, nodded, and walked away. It was maddening. That night, Linda sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold and a growing sense of anger. She flipped through the HOA rule book, again reading the same lines over and over, hoping to find something stronger, something that would really back her up this time. No livestock or poultry permitted within residential zones. She underlined it twice. But what really bothered her was the way the Morales family acted like nothing had happened. The next morning, they were right back out there, watering plants, collecting eggs, and laughing like everything was fine. Their daughter even waved at Linda as she passed by. Linda didn't wave back. Instead, she grabbed her phone and started taking more pictures. She zoomed in on the chicken coop, the compost bins, the rows of vegetables. She took screenshots of the garden from Google Maps. She even used a small drone she bought online, under the excuse of neighborhood security, to take aerial shots of the backyard. Then she began sending emails. First to the HOA board again, but this time she didn't stop there. She copied the city zoning department, then animal control, then the health department. She wrote detailed messages explaining how the chickens could carry diseases, how the compost might attract rats, and how the bees were a danger to children playing nearby. She signed each email with her full name, address, and HOA position. "I'm trying to do the right thing," she told her husband that night. "Someone has to stand up for the rules." Her husband, Tom, sighed. He had seen this before. Once, Linda had sent an 8-page letter to the school board because their son's teacher gave him a B+ instead of an A. It hadn't gone well. "Maybe you should let it go," he suggested gently. But Linda shook her head. "I can't. If I don't fight for what's right, who will?" Tom didn't answer. He just turned off the TV and went to bed. The neighborhood begins to change. While Linda was busy writing emails and making calls, something else was happening across the fence. Word had spread quickly about the incident with the police. People who lived nearby had heard the sirens and peeked out their windows. Some had even seen Linda watching from behind her curtains like a detective on a crime show. At first, people were confused. Then they were curious. Then they were entertained. By the end of the week, the Morales family had become local heroes. One neighbor brought them cookies with a note that read, "Love your garden. Ignore the noise next door." Another offered to help build a new trellis for the grapevines. A teenager down the street asked if he could help feed the chickens in exchange for extra veggies. And slowly but surely, the Morales family started hosting little gatherings in their backyard. They called it Farm Day. Every Saturday, neighbors were invited to come pick fresh herbs, grab a carton of eggs, or try some homemade honey lemonade. They played soft music, set up lawn chairs, and even built a small wooden stand where they sold extra produce for $2 a bag. People loved it. Kids ran around barefoot, picking strawberries and chasing butterflies. Older adults sat in the shade, sipping tea and chatting. Even the dog walkers stopped by to say hello, and every week, Linda watched from behind her blinds. She hated it. It wasn't fair. She was the one who cared about the neighborhood. She was the one who stood up for the rules. And yet here they were, cheering on a backyard farm like it was some kind of festival. She tried to ignore it at first. She kept her curtains drawn, her blinds shut, and her windows closed. But the sound still came through. The laughter, the music, the happy chatter. It was like the whole neighborhood had turned against her. The breaking point. Linda couldn't take it anymore. She decided to take things to the next level, and a quiet Tuesday evening, she drove to City Hall and filed a formal complaint with the zoning board. She brought printed photos, copies of the HOA rulebook, and even a short essay she wrote titled, "The Dangers of Unregulated Urban Farming in Residential Areas." She handed it all over to a bored-looking clerk behind the counter. "This is very important," she insisted. "If we allow this behavior to continue, our entire neighborhood will turn into a jungle of dirt, bugs, and disease." The clerk barely looked at her. "We'll look into it." Linda left feeling hopeful. This time, she thought, someone would finally listen. But a week later, she got a response from the city zoning office. It was polite, professional, and disappointing. "Dear Ms. Carmichael, after reviewing the details provided, we found no current violations of city zoning laws. Chickens are permitted under certain conditions, and beekeeping is allowed as long as hives are properly maintained. Thank you for your concern." Linda stared at the letter in disbelief. How could they side with the Morales family again? She crumpled the paper and threw it into the trash. That was when she decided she was going to make this personal. Linda Carmichael was not one to back down. Even after being ignored by the HOA board, rejected by city officials, and mocked online, she still believed that justice would come. If she kept pushing hard enough. She had spent weeks collecting more photos, writing detailed reports, and even printing out comments from Reddit where people had made fun of her. She underlined every joke and sarcastic remark, as if they were proof of some kind of conspiracy against her. "I'm doing this for the neighborhood," she told herself every morning as she got ready. "Someone has to stand up for what's right." And now, she finally had her chance. The next HOA meeting was coming up in 2 days. This time, she wasn't going to sit quietly in the back row like everyone else. This time, she was going to take center stage. She prepared a slideshow. Yes, an actual PowerPoint presentation. It included maps of the neighborhood, close-up photos of the Morales backyard, screenshots of Reddit posts, and even a chart comparing the property values before and after the farm started. She titled it, "Urban Farming, a Threat to Our Community." On the day of the meeting, Linda arrived early. She wore her best blazer and carried a folder full of documents. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like someone who meant business. As neighbors began filing in, she gave them polite smiles. Some returned them. Others avoided eye contact. The Morales family arrived last. They walked in together. Mr. Morales in his usual gardening gloves, Mrs. Morales carrying a basket of fresh herbs, their kids trailing behind with backpacks slung over their shoulders. People greeted them warmly. One neighbor handed Mr. Morales a small envelope with a thank you note inside. Another asked if they could pick up some extra tomatoes later in the week. Linda watched all of this from her seat near the front, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. When the meeting officially began, the HOA president, a soft-spoken man named Greg, called the room to order. He went through the usual agenda: road maintenance, landscaping updates, new proposals. Then came the section labeled Open Floor, Resident Concerns. That was when Linda stood up. All eyes turned to her. She cleared her throat and opened her folder. "I'd like to bring something important to everyone's attention," she said, voice calm but firm. "Something that affects all of us." She pulled out her laptop and connected it to the projector. A slide appeared on the screen behind her. Urban farming, a threat to our community. Some people leaned forward. Others exchanged glances. Linda clicked to the next slide. It showed a photo of the Morales backyard with red circles around the chicken coop and bee boxes. "As many of you know," she began, "the house at 425 Maple Street has been turned into a personal farm. Chickens, bees, compost bins, and rows of vegetables have taken over what used to be a normal suburban home." She paused, scanning the room. "This may seem harmless at first," she continued, "but I ask you, what happens when every house starts doing this? What happens when we no longer have neat lawns, clean sidewalks, or quiet evenings?" She clicked again. Next slide. A screenshot of a Reddit post mocking her. "Karen calls cops on chickens. Cops say nothing illegal." There were a few chuckles in the crowd. Linda ignored them. "This is the kind of disrespect we're dealing with," she said. "Not just from outsiders, but from our own neighbors." She turned to face the Morales family directly. "I've tried to do this the right way," she said. "I've contacted the HOA, the police, animal control, and the zoning board. But no one seems to care." Her voice rose slightly. "Well, I care. And I believe most of you do too." Silence filled the room. Then someone raised their hand. It was Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman who lived 3 houses down. "Yes?" Linda said, hopeful. Mrs. Thompson adjusted her glasses and spoke clearly. "I've lived here for 20 years, she said, "and I've never seen this neighborhood so lively. People are smiling again. Kids are playing outside. We actually talk to each other now." She looked at Linda. "And you want to stop that? Because of a few chickens?" Murmurs of agreement spread through the room. Another neighbor stood up. "I visited the Morales garden," he said. "It's beautiful. They grow organic food, they share it with everyone, and they follow all the rules." He glanced at Linda. "You're the only one making this a problem." More hands went up. One neighbor shared how the Morales family helped him plant his first vegetable patch. Another mentioned how the kids learned about nature and responsibility from feeding the chickens. A teenager even thanked them for giving him a summer job watering plants and collecting eggs. By the time Linda tried to speak again, the mood had shifted completely. She clicked to another slide, this one showing a map of the neighborhood with red arrows pointing to the Morales house. "This is not what we signed up for," she said, her voice rising. We live in a subdivision, not a farm. But instead of shock or concern, she saw something else in the crowd. Pity. Even the HOA president looked uncomfortable. Finally, Greg raised a hand. "Thank you, Linda," he said gently. "We appreciate your concerns." He turned to the rest of the room. "We reviewed the Morales family's situation thoroughly. They followed all local laws, obtained the proper permits, and are not violating any HOA rules." He paused. "In fact," he added, "we recently received an award nomination for Most Eco-Friendly Neighborhood. And the Morales family played a big role in that." Gasps, smiles, clapping. Linda stood frozen. She couldn't believe it. She had come here expecting support. She had come here to win. Instead, she had been publicly shut down, in front of everyone. The HOA meeting ended quietly after that. No one clapped loudly or booed, but everyone knew what had just happened. Linda Carmichael had been defeated, not by rules, not by laws, but by her own neighbors. She packed up her laptop and folder in silence, avoiding eye contact with everyone. As she walked out of the community center, the usual greetings were gone. No hello, no polite smiles, just quiet glances and soft whispers behind hands. She got into her car and sat there for a full 5 minutes before driving off. That night, she didn't make tea. She didn't watch TV. She didn't even call her sister like she usually did when things went wrong. Instead, she stared at the ceiling, wondering how it had all gone so badly. The end of Linda's reign. By Monday morning, the news of what happened at the meeting had spread fast. Neighbors who used to nod politely now avoided Linda completely. Some even crossed the street when they saw her coming. Her mailbox was empty. No more neighborhood party invites, no friendly notes. Even the local grocery store clerk gave her a strange look as he handed her back her receipt. And then came the final blow. An email from the HOA board arrived in her inbox. Eager. Subject: Your position on the board. Linda opened it with shaking fingers. Dear Ms. Carmichael, after careful review of recent events and community feedback, we regret to inform you that your position on the HOA board will be ending effective immediately. We believe this is in the best interest of maintaining harmony within our neighborhood. Thank you for your past service. She read it 3 times, then she threw her phone across the room. This wasn't fair. This wasn't justice. She had only tried to protect the rules, but no matter how much she argued in her head, the truth was clear. She had lost. Life after Linda. Meanwhile, life across the fence was blooming, literally and figuratively. The Morales family continued their urban farm with more support than ever. Their Saturday farm days became a weekly tradition. They started offering gardening classes for kids, taught composting workshops, and even partnered with a local school to help students learn about healthy eating. Their garden grew bigger and healthier every week. They added new plants, built a small greenhouse, and expanded their chicken coop to include nesting boxes for more hens. Neighbors brought them tools, seeds, and even old furniture to use in the yard. One man helped build a wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Maple Street Farm." People took photos and posted them online. Soon, the Morales family was getting messages from people all over the country asking for tips on urban farming. A local newspaper even wrote a story about them titled, "How One Family Turned Backyard Dreams into Community Magic." And yes, Linda's name appeared in that article too, not as a hero, as the woman who tried to stop it all. The Internet finds out. It didn't take long for Reddit to find the newspaper article. Within hours, the original post had exploded again. New comments poured in. Karen called cops on chickens, gets kicked off HOA board. Satisfying. She literally tried to shut down a family teaching kids about nature. Plot twist: The bad neighbor was actually the good guy. Should have let them grow tomatoes in peace. Screenshots of the article spread like wildfire. Some people made memes. One showed Linda standing behind a fence with binoculars, watching the Morales backyard like a detective. Another showed a cartoon of her yelling at chickens while bees circled above her head. It was funny, it was cruel, and it was karma. The final straw. One evening, Linda stood at her window like always. She watched as a group of kids ran through the Morales yard chasing butterflies. An older couple sat on lawn chairs drinking lemonade. A young mom picked fresh basil from a pot near the porch. Laughter filled the air. Music played softly in the background. It was peaceful, happy, and Linda felt alone. For the first time in years, she realized something painful. She had spent so much time fighting for rules and order. She had forgotten what it meant to be part of a community. She had pushed everyone away. And now, she had no one left. The next morning, a "for sale" sign appeared in front of her house. No one was surprised. Where are they now? 6 months later, Linda was gone. She sold her house quickly, below market value, and moved to a different town. Rumor had it she tried to join another HOA board, but someone recognized her from the viral Reddit posts. She never lasted long. As for the Morales family, they were thriving. Their garden was now famous in the city. They started selling their honey at the local farmers market. They even won an award for sustainability. Mr. Morales was invited to speak at schools about urban farming. Mrs. Morales launched a blog where she shared tips on growing food in small spaces. Their teenage daughter posted videos of their daily life on TikTok, showing everything from harvesting carrots to feeding baby chicks. And every once in a while, someone would comment, "Wait, is this the house where Karen tried to shut you down?" To which she would reply with a smile, "Yup, and look what happened." Because sometimes, the sweetest kind of karma isn't revenge. It's seeing the world move on without you. Happier, greener, and full of life. And that's exactly what happened on Maple Street.